Respected Dharma Masters, fellow practitioners, and guests,阿弥陀佛. The topic of today's discussion is Buddhism for the modern world. And as a Buddhist practitioner, how relevant is Buddhism for the modern world? There are 6 principles of Buddhism that was expounded upon by Venerable Master Xing of Guang Shan. And I think it sums up the heart of Buddhism today. The 6 principles I will read, and then we will discuss each one. And hopefully by the end of this video, as a Buddhist practitioner yourself, you can see that Buddhism is relevant today and how to incorporate Buddhism into every facet of your life. Far being just a religion, Buddhism is much more than that. Buddhism is religion. Buddhism is a science of being, and Buddhism is a blueprint for yourself and your future. And it is a way to help us break the karmic bonds that keep us returning to samsara, to the Saha world. So the 6 principles of Buddhism by Venerable Master Xing. 1. Humanity. The Buddha did not come or go without leaving a trace, nor was he some sort of illusion. The Buddha was a living human being, just like the rest of us. He had parents, a family, and he lived a life. It was through this human life that he showed his great loving kindness and compassion, his moral character, and his wisdom. Principle 2. Emphasis on daily life. The Buddha taught that we must practice his teachings in our daily lives. He provided guidance on everything from how to eat, dress, work, and live, to how to walk, stand, sit, and sleep. He gave clear directions on every aspect of life, from how to maintain our relationships with family and friends, to how we should conduct ourselves in the social and political arenas. 3. Altruism. The Buddha was born into this world to teach, to provide an example, and to bring joy to all beings. He nurtured all beings, for he always had the best interests of others in his mind. In short, his every thought, word, and action arose from a deep care and concern for others. 4. Joyfulness. The Buddhist teachings give people joy. Through the limitless compassion of his heart, the Buddha aimed to relieve the suffering of all beings so that they could be happy. 5. Timelessness. The Buddha arose in this world for one great matter: to build a special relationship with all of us who live in this world. Although the Buddha lived some 2,500 years ago and has already entered nirvana, he left the seed of liberation for all subsequent generations. Even today, the Buddha's ideals and teachings serve as timely, relevant guides for all of us. And 6. Universality. The entire life of the Buddha can be characterized by the Buddha's spirit of wanting to liberate all beings without exclusion. The Buddha loved beings of all forms, whether they were animals or humans, male or female, young or old, Buddhist or non-Buddhist. He cared for all without distinction. These 6 principles are extremely important because regardless of what school of Buddhism you subscribe to, these 6 principles are at the heart of all Buddhism. Whether you are a practitioner of Chan, whether you are a Pure Land Buddhist, whether you combine the two like we do in China, whether you are one of the Japanese schools, Hinayana or Mahayana, Vajrayana, it makes no difference. These 6 principles are the keys, the cornerstones, if you will, of Buddhism. And it is because Master Xing put these in such succinct words that we can now have this conversation. Rather than go one by one, I will address a few topics concerning the principles that we have just discussed. And some of them, to me, as a teacher, I find myself coming back to again and again, especially when speaking with practitioners. The reason that the Buddha appeared as a man, not as a heavenly being, and not as one of the ghosts in one of the hell realms, was to give us all hope, those that were born mere mortals, that there is a way to break free from the karmic bonds that keep us returning to this Saha world of endurance and suffering. Buddha had parents, like all of us. Shakyamuni Buddha was born of a very privileged life, and indeed a prince. But he gave up his titles and his throne for each one of us to help us liberate ourselves here today, not 2,500 years ago. His teachings are just as important today as they were then, and in a lot of ways more so, because we are so far separated from the true preachings of Shakyamuni Buddha. The emphasis on daily life, rather than a set of rules and regulations that must be followed or some form of punishment, will be the reward of not following the rules. No, the Buddha gave us suggestions, not dogma, for daily living. We are free to accept or to not accept any teachings that the Buddha gave us, so long as the ones that we accept lead us to the path of liberation. Indeed, the Buddha himself said that there are 84,000 paths to the Dharma. Find that one gate that appeals to you. If you are more interested in Chan, practice that. If you are more interested in Pure Land, practice that. Of course, I would say all forms of Buddhism, regardless, hold equal importance. The method that I expound upon and that I am a practitioner of is Pure Land Buddhism, specifically of the Chinese school, which combines elements of Chan and Pure Land together. But that is for another video. The Buddha specifically spoke of daily life. And why is that important? Because as human beings, my friends, we live in the Saha world. And from day to day, we have to live in this world. So to have at least some foundation of a good strategy for meeting the challenges of this life today in 2014, it is wonderful to have these blueprints, not dogmatic, you must. There are no thou shalts. There are simply thou should. Or, phrased another way, if thou will do this, and you will find happiness. Which brings us into joyfulness. I don't know exactly when Buddhism gained such a negative reputation as being a pessimistic set of beliefs. But the Buddha simply taught us the causes of suffering, and that it is all around us, and that we are born into suffering. That should not be a point of pessimism. The Buddha taught us how to relieve those sufferings. So indeed, that is a cause for joy. A Buddhist should always have happiness in their heart, even in the face of adversity, even in the face of individuals who may hate or despise you. It is not simply a turn the other cheek philosophy, much as the Christian teachings believe in. It is not simply a turn the other cheek mentality. Indeed, we should turn the other cheek, but the Buddha taught us the why, not simply to do it because I said so. The Buddha gives explanations for all of his teachings, because again, at the cornerstone, Buddhism teaches in the law of cause and effect, or karma. And the Buddha expounds upon this result is because of this cause, and teaches you and I how to, in a lot of ways, see the cause, or see the effect before we commit the cause. So in one way, we can root out any negative actions. Sometimes we are unable to do so because of our own karma, or the karma of others. No, my friends, the Buddha's teaching should fill us with happiness and joy. And not simply because the Pure Land is somewhere out there to the west of here. While we make vows to be reborn into Amitabha's Pure Land after this life, why should we only focus our attentions on ourselves and our liberation and future Buddhahood in the Pure Land? My friends, understanding this, you would not only dedicate your merits for yourself, but for your family, for your friends, that all of us would be reborn into Amitabha's Pure Land. And not just that, we would focus our efforts in this life on making this world a Pure Land of bliss and happiness. We would focus our efforts more on loving compassion for one another, even those that absolutely despise us, and even those whom we feel we do not like. Buddhism is realistic. Buddhism does not simply tell you love one another because you have to. Buddhism tells you why you must love one another. And the reason is every single one of us has Buddha nature in them. So when you are hostile to someone, in a sense, it is being hostile to Milophal. It is hostile to being, it is equal to being hostile to Maitreya, the future Buddha. For you and I are all future Buddhas at some point. So not just focusing our efforts, reciting the Buddha name, Amitofo, 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 Namo Amitofo, Namo Amitofo, for ourselves, but for all, Buddhist and non-Buddhist. Not for their conversion to Buddhism, although that would be a wonderful thing. No, we are not out to convert anyone. We simply are here as the Buddha was, to show an example, to show an alternative, to show the truth of liberation and how one can attain that. Not to beat someone over the head with a sutra, or proclaim to them this is the only truth and you must follow this or else. And that fills us with joy, another cause of joy, because we are not called to force people to believe what the Buddha taught, simply to express it. And it is up to that individual or not, whether to take a seed, the whole thing, or nothing. And if they choose nothing, and they choose to spit in your face, and choose to speak ill of the Buddha, you smile, knowing that you at least shared the Dharma, A弥陀佛, and be on your way, without any ill will in your heart. That is difficult. But we must follow the Buddha's example. There was not one individual in all of the hundreds of sutras that we have where the Buddha was angry with anyone. Not one place. And how do we do this generically as Buddhist practitioners? As I said before, suffering is a fact, and the Buddha taught us of this suffering. When the Buddha spoke of suffering as the first of the Noble Truths, it was because the Buddha wanted us to recognize the cause of that suffering so that we could liberate ourselves and that we could be free from that suffering and attain the happiness that we just spoke of. There are 4 ways to do this. 4 simple ways as a Buddhist in your daily life. Is it wonderful that you offer incense every morning? If you can have time to have a full chanting service, wonderful. Recite the sutras, wonderful. If all you can do is recite the Buddha name constantly in your mind and in your heart throughout the day, that's even better. But while you're doing that, in your job, in the car, washing the dishes, dealing with a spouse, having problems with your friends, remember these 4 guidelines. And without all of the lofty speak, without quoting sutras, at the essence, these 4 principles will help you. Very simple, but very hard at the same time. Principle 1, give others confidence. Don't just build yourself up. Don't talk about how wonderful you are. Even someone who is a hate-filled person, give that person confidence. Build their self-esteem. Help them to understand that they are a good person. They have the potential to be a good person, and genuinely mean it. 2, give others joy. Don't simply seek happiness yourself, but share that happiness with others. Not in a combative way, but simply take pleasure in other people's happiness, even at the expense of your own ego. Number 3, give others hope. Let them know that things always can and will be better. And not just in a lofty sense, but here and now, in this life. Things will get better. Help them to understand that and help them to experience things getting better. Do something for them, especially someone who hates you. Take an extra moment, cook them a meal. Don't simply do something spiritual and pray for them. While that is well and good, and you should, do something physical in this life for them. Sometimes this is very hard, but we must push ourselves if we are to be Buddhas at some future point. If we recite the Buddha name, if we sit in meditation, and we're only concerned about ourselves, we will never achieve the goal. And 4, render service to others, especially the things you don't want to do. Because this shows them that you are not self-centered and you are willing to give of yourself, like the Buddha. Always be willing to lend a hand, and not simply for your own good, but lend a hand not because you're wanting to do good, but because it is good. Remember, the Buddha taught us, do that which is good, refrain from that which is evil, and purify your mind. And if you can do this, you are already a bodhisattva. My friends, this brief talk was about how we can live Buddhism in our daily lives. Not dogmatic, but always remember these principles, and constantly, always from the moment you wake to the moment you sleep, whether sitting, standing, walking, lying down, reading a book, watching a movie, driving, always recite A弥陀佛, 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 A弥陀佛. Constantly. Be ever mindful of the Buddha, Amitabha. Make vows to be reborn into his pure land and attain Buddhahood. Pray for others, the suffering ones, the sad ones, the ones that despise you, and the ones that love you. Love all, despise none, and follow these principles. And my friends, you will see a marked improvement and change in your life. May the Buddha bless you. A弥陀佛.
Nhãn vô ngài đại bi tâm đà la ni. Nam mô Hằng Ca Đa 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 Ra Ya Ya. Nam mô A Di Đà Bà Đô Yên Đế Thương Bát La Ya. Bồ Đề Tát Đoa Bà Ya.